When Canada declared war on Germany on September 10th, 1939, it was making a statement. Though still tied to Britain, it was an independent nation willing to commit to the struggle against fascism. At the time, however, the Canadian Army was little more than symbolic, with only around 4,500 regular soldiers and a militia force that was poorly trained and under-equipped. It was, by most standards, insignificant. Yet by 1945, Canada had fielded an army of nearly 750,000 men, commanded a multinational field army in northwest Europe, and had earned a reputation as a skillful and tough fighting force. But how capable was the Canadian Army in World War II really? The first great challenge was expansion. By late 1939, volunteers were already swelling the ranks, and the 1st Canadian Infantry Division was raised and shipped to Britain. Over time, more formations followed. The 2nd and 3rd Canadian Infantry Divisions, the 4th Canadian Armoured Division, and the 5th Canadian Armoured Division. By 1944, the 1st Canadian Army in Europe, under General Harry Crerar, included not only Canadian units, but also British, Polish, and Dutch formations. But before Canada's divisions made their mark in Europe, they endured disaster in Asia. In 1941, 2 Canadian battalions, the Royal Rifles of Canada and the Winnipeg Grenadiers, were sent to bolster the garrison of Hong Kong. When Japan attacked in December, they were thrown into a hopeless defence. The Canadians fought with determination. John Osborne of the Winnipeg Grenadiers famously smothered a grenade with his body, earning Canada's first Victoria Cross of the war. But after 17 days, Hong Kong fell. Over 500 Canadians were killed, and almost 2,000 endured years of brutal captivity. In Europe, Canada's baptism of fire came with the 1942 Dieppe raid. The 2nd Canadian Infantry Division bore the brunt of the assault. What was meant as a reconnaissance in force turned into a bloodbath. Of nearly 5,000 Canadians who landed, over 900 were killed and 2,000 taken prisoner. Units like the Royal Regiment of Canada and the Essex Scottish Regiment were decimated. German defenders later admitted they had been impressed by the ferocity of the attack, but Dieppe showed the dangers of underestimating German defences. Yet the raid provided painful but invaluable lessons in amphibious planning, fire support, and intelligence that would directly contribute to the success of D-Day. By 1943, the Canadian Army was fighting in the Mediterranean. The 1st Canadian Infantry Division and 1st Canadian Armoured Brigade landed in Sicily in July. Here, Canadians captured towns such as Asoro and Leonfort in daring assaults against German paratroopers. One of the commanders who distinguished himself was Major General Guy Simonds, who would rise to prominence in Normandy. In Italy, Canadians gained a reputation for tenacity. Nowhere was this clearer than at Ortona in December 1943. The Royal 22nd Regiment, the Vendôme, and the Seaforth Highlanders of Canada fought a brutal house-to-house battle against the veteran German 1st Parachute Division. Canadians pioneered the mouse-holing tactic, blasting through walls with explosives to avoid deadly sniper fire in the streets. After weeks of combat, Ortona was theirs, but at a cost of over 1,300 Canadian dead. German opponents later remarked that the Canadians fought with a grim determination equal to their best units. The Canadian Army's defining moment came in northwest Europe. On June 6, 1944, the 3rd Canadian Infantry Division and the 2nd Canadian Armoured Brigade stormed Juno Beach. Facing strong resistance, particularly from the 716th German Infantry Division and elements of the 21st Panzer Division, the Canadians nonetheless achieved the deepest Allied penetrations on D-Day. Brigadier Harry Foster, commanding 7th Brigade, remarked that his men fought like veterans, though most had never seen combat. Casualties were high, over 1,000 on the first day, but their success was undeniable. In the bloody weeks of Normandy, Canadians were repeatedly tasked with breaking through German defences. At Carpiquet and Verrières Ridge, they faced the fanatical 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, composed of young Nazi zealots. The fighting was ferocious. At Verrières Ridge, Canadian losses were staggering, over 1,300 casualties in a single day. Yet they held on, wearing down the Germans until later offensives broke the line. During the Falaise pocket in August, the Canadian 2nd and 3rd Divisions, alongside the Polish 1st Armoured Division, closed the gap that trapped tens of thousands of German soldiers. Major David Curry of the South Alberta Regiment earned the Victoria Cross for leading his mixed force in holding St. Lambert-sur-Dives under counterattack, personally capturing or killing over 300 Germans. His actions symbolise the Canadian contribution to sealing one of the greatest encirclements of the war. Perhaps the hardest campaign for Canadians came in late 1944, the Battle of the Scheldt. Here, the 1st Canadian Army was ordered to clear the approaches to Antwerp. The flooded polders, muddy dikes, and German fortifications made the terrain a nightmare. Units like the Canadian Scottish Regiment and the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry fought in waist-deep water under relentless fire. Casualties were severe, almost 13,000, but their success opened Antwerp, which became indispensable for Allied logistics. Field Marshal Montgomery admitted later, "The Canadian Army fought magnificently in the Scheldt. Without their success, we could not have sustained the advance into Germany." By 1945, the Canadian Army was not only fighting but commanding multinational forces. Under General Crerar, the 1st Canadian Army included British, Polish, and Dutch formations. In the Netherlands, Canadians liberated starving civilians, earning lasting gratitude. The Dutch royal family later declared, "We shall never forget the Canadians." Canada's army produced many distinguished commanders. General Harry Crerar, though sometimes criticised for caution, successfully managed one of the largest Allied field armies. Guy Simonds, innovative and aggressive, was praised by Montgomery as one of the most effective corps commanders in Northwest Europe. At the divisional level, men like Major General Charles Foulkes and Major General Rod Keller, though Keller was criticised for poor performance in Normandy, commanded Canadian units in decisive battles. Canadian soldiers themselves earned an impressive record of bravery. 16 Victoria Crosses were awarded to Canadians, including Curry at Falaise, Frederick Tilston of the Essex Scottish at the Hochwald Forest, and Smoky Smith of the Seaforth Highlanders, who single-handedly destroyed a German tank and repelled an infantry attack in Italy. Canada's sacrifices were immense, over 42,000 dead and 55,000 wounded in a country of just 11 million people. Their army was relatively small compared to Britain, the US, or the Soviet Union, but consistently fought above its weight. German commanders frequently acknowledged Canadian toughness. Kurt Meyer of the 12th SS called them first-class soldiers who combined discipline with initiative. Allied commanders agreed. General Omar Bradley described them as steady and dependable, while Montgomery said, "The Canadian soldier is as fine a fighting man as any in the world." So, how capable was the Canadian Army in World War II? It began the war unprepared, suffered early disasters at Hong Kong and Dieppe, but learned quickly, adapted, and by 1944 was entrusted with some of the most difficult operations of the campaign. The Canadians fought and defeated elite German units in Italy, Normandy, and the Scheldt, and played a decisive role in the liberation of Western Europe. They may not have been the largest force, but their professionalism, determination, and sacrifice gave them a reputation for excellence far beyond their size. In the end, Canada's army was not just capable, it was indispensable. Thanks for watching. So, what do you think? How capable was the Canadian Army in World War II? Let me know in the comments below. And if you have enjoyed this video, then please like, share, and subscribe for more analysis of the Second World War.